Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
All right, everybody, peace. Welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast Show, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As you guys know, I'm your host, Sean Cottle, and we have got a lot of coverage for you guys today. Got a lot of WNBA playoff action that we're going to preview. We've also got to cover some breaking news in the WNBA, and that is Breanna Stewart winning the AP WNBA Player of the Year. And we're going to close out the show today with a very special segment, very interesting segment. And we're going to be debating who was the better player throughout their collegiate career between Jayson Williams and Juan Dixon. I'm sure a lot of my ACC fans and hoopsters will be pretty excited about that segment right there. But before we get started, guys, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button as well to stay up to date on all of our latest content, and be sure to subscribe to us on Patreon as well, so you can get full access to all exclusive content that we post daily. And if you would like to support our network and our company, you can follow the link in the ticker below. None of this is possible without you guys, so we just say thank you to you guys, the fans, for all the support that you show us and trusting us to give you the best insight when it comes to the sporting world, and specifically basketball. So thank you guys once again. But with that being said, let's get right into it, guys. Breaking news coming out of WNBA: Breanna Stewart winning AP WNBA Player of the Year. Want to get specific with you guys. This is not the WNBA MVP award. This is simply the AP Player of the Year award. For those of you who don't know, Breanna Stewart is the first WNBA player to win consecutive AP WNBA Player of the Year awards. As you guys know, she won AP Player of the Year last year and also won it back in 2018. And coincidentally, Breanna Stewart won AP WNBA Player of the Year last year, but lost the MVP award to A'ja Wilson. And this AP WNBA Player of the Year award race was the closest since its inception, because Breanna Stewart actually won by only one vote. Breanna Stewart won this award by one vote ahead of A'ja Wilson. And Breanna Stewart and A'ja Wilson were the two leading vote getters, followed by Alyssa Thomas of the Connecticut Sun. And that was the player, Alyssa Thomas was a player that we had talked about being a dark horse candidate in the MVP race as the season winds down. And as you guys know, the official MVP award will be announced September 26th during the playoffs. But we can't necessarily use this AP WNBA Player of the Year award as an indicator of who's going to win the MVP, because clearly, like we just stated, last year Breanna Stewart won AP Player of the Year, but ended up losing the MVP award to A'ja Wilson. And the big debate now is, well, who is going to win the MVP award? And I can't recall if I've ever seen a MVP race this close in the WNBA. The closest that I can recall is, the closest WNBA MVP race that I can recall in recent memory was perhaps Candace Parker and Maya Moore in 2012. That race was extremely close. That WNBA MVP race was extremely close. Or Lauren Jackson and Diana Taurasi in 2007. And if I recall correctly, Tamika Catchings was in that MVP race as well. That race in 2007 was extremely close as well. But those are a couple WNBA MVP races that I recall going down to the wire. And we talked about this last week. We touched on it a little bit, how the WNBA needs marketability. It needs to have narratives and storylines in order to better market their players. And the dynamic and the storyline between Breanna Stewart being squaring her off against A'ja Wilson is great narrative and it's great for storytelling. Both of these players could essentially play the same position. They both play the stretch four. Both of them can put the ball on the floor. Breanna Stewart's a little better ball handler than A'ja Wilson. A'ja Wilson has a little bit more physicality in the low post. Both of these players are putting up some phenomenal numbers. I mean, Breanna Stewart's currently averaging 23 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.5 steals on the season, while A'ja Wilson is averaging 22.8 points, 9.5 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1.5 steals per game. So both of these, and both players have won championship. This is a narrative that's necessary for the WNBA, because we have seen that even with a year like this year, where we've had 2 players set the single season scoring record, we've had a player set the single season assist record, we also had a player set the single season record for most triple doubles in a season, and this is the first year that the season has been expanded to 46 games, and this is the season with the most nationally televised WNBA games. Even with all this publicity and all the excitement that's going on in the WNBA, it's still failing to get the necessary viewers and necessary TV revenue to financially provide for the league. And it's because people aren't buying into it. People simply aren't buying into it. And people aren't buying into it because the WNBA is not marketing the players correctly. And we have to remember, at the end of the day, sports is all about narrative. Sports is entertainment at the end of the day. So how can we market and create storylines within the WNBA? And this dynamic between Breanna Stewart versus A'ja Wilson is a way to do that, a way to sort of create that narrative, that dynamic. East Coast, West Coast, Vegas, New York. Even the racial dynamic is somewhat plays a factor in it as well, akin to a Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And that's what they should get the blueprint from. We had Showtime Lakers, and we had the dominant Boston Celtics, 2 of the all-time great teams. Similar to New York Liberty and the Vegas Aces. With the Vegas Aces, one of the best backcourts of all time, with Chelsea Gray and Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young. With the addition of Candace Parker before she got injured this season, was considered to be one of the greatest teams of all time. And then you got the New York Liberty with Breanna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, Sabrina Ionescu, and Courtney Vandersloot. Once again, on paper, one of the greatest teams ever constructed. These 2 super teams, led by 2 dominant superstars, the 2 best players in the WNBA, squaring off against each other. This is a narrative that the WNBA has to hone in on and has to take advantage of if it's going to reap the benefits of these players. And there's reason why the WNBA can't get consistent marketing, but this is a way that it can kind of make up for that and get the marketing necessary and almost recoup the money that they're losing. And it would be remiss of them if they don't take advantage of this during the playoffs. you have to create the storyline. You have to create the narrative. Okay, Breonna Stewart versus A'ja Wilson. You have to pit them against each other. And I'm not saying it in a negative aspect, but just from a marketing perspective, from a storyline aspect. Who's the greater player? Which team is better? The East Coast, West Coast? Who's going to win it all? You got to market it that way, because one thing that the NBA has done so well, specifically with NBC in the late 90s with that second three-peat team with Chicago and Michael Jordan, they did a great job of establishing storylines and narratives over the course of the season. And that's why it felt like when you would watch those NBA games on NBC back in the late 90s, it felt like you were watching a movie. It felt like you were tuning in each week for a television show, for a television series. And that galvanizes fans. That draws new viewers in. And that's what the WNBA has to learn to do consistently. And if they learn to do that, then they can generate more money and more revenue. Then they can start to expand. Then they can start to open more roster spots for women players, because one point of contention, especially during the start of the season, was that it's too few roster spots in the WNBA. Well, obviously there's too few roster spots because there's too few teams, but there's too few teams because the WNBA can't expand. And the WNBA can't expand because it doesn't generate enough revenue. And this is how you fix the issue of how to generate more revenue. And it is a fixable issue in the WNBA, but it has to start there with the marketability. And this is the greatest space that the WNBA has been in terms of just pure talent. As we talked about this last week, this is the most talent I've seen in the WNBA at one point in time since I've been watching basketball. Even with the Cheryl Swoops and the Cynthia Coopers and the Tina Thompsons and the Lisa Leslies and the Dawn Staleys, even when they were all in the WNBA at one time, there's still far more talent just top to bottom now than there ever was in the WNBA. And this is prime opportunity for the WNBA to market your players through storylines, through narratives. The comeback kid, the player coming back from the injury, the villain role. A lot of times we notice is that a lot of times, as sports don't want to cast the villain role when it comes to women's sports. But I think that could be beneficial for the WNBA, casting someone as the villain. Obviously we see it in NBA and NFL and in male sports all the time, but that's something that could be used for the WNBA, casting someone as the villain, the protagonist, the anti-hero. Quintessential themes that are prominent in almost all movies and television series. Apply that to the WNBA, because once again, as we say, sports is just entertainment. But once again, congratulations to Breonna Stewart for winning AP WNBA Player of the Year award. But guys, in our next segment, we are going to preview the first round WNBA playoffs first round matchup between the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx. So guys, stick around, you're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, welcome back. In case you missed our first segment, we broke down Breanna Stewart winning AP WNBA Player of the Year, what that means for the WNBA, how that correlates to the actual MVP race, and how the WNBA can use this to better market themselves, especially going into the playoffs. In our last segment of the show today, guys, we're going to break down a very interesting matchup. We're going to talk about who's the better player between Juan Dixon and Jayson Williams. I know a couple of my old head ACC fans are going to be really excited about that one. And we're also going to break down the matchups between the Lynx and Dream and the Dallas Wings in the first round matchup of the WNBA playoffs. But with this segment, guys, let's talk about the matchup between the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx. However, before we get started, be sure to subscribe to us. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button as well to stay up to date on all of our latest content. And if you haven't already, guys, be sure to subscribe to us on Patreon so you can get access to all of our exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And if you'd like to support our company and our network, follow the link in the ticker below. None of this is possible without you guys. Just once again, thank you so much. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast, the GSMC College Football Podcast, our Fantasy Football Podcast, and our NFL Podcast as well. All of our hosts provide great content and great insight, and they are some of the best in the business, and it's a blessing to be able to work with them. But guys, with that being said, let's cover this matchup between the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx. Okay, got our 3-seed Connecticut Sun going up against the 6-seed Minnesota Lynx. Connecticut Sun obviously has an MVP candidate, Alyssa Thomas, who is leading the team in all statistical categories except for blocks. And also, Alyssa Thomas, actually, as we talked about earlier in the show, set the single season record for most assists in a season, but also for most triple doubles in a season, with 6 on the season so far. But Connecticut is an interesting team that I had concerns about coming into the season. We know that Connecticut, lost Jonquel Jones to New York, Jasmine Thomas to the Sparks, and Kurt Miller left as head coach. With those departures, I was concerned about whether Connecticut would have enough to make the playoffs and to and to be contending, and to quite frankly, I wasn't sure if they would be able to make the playoffs. But knowing that they had Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner and Natisha Heidemann and Bree Jones still there on the roster, gave a little hope, gave a little bit of reassurance for that fan base. But however, when Bree Jones suffered a season-ending injury in June, most people wrote off Connecticut. Most people wrote them off as a team that wouldn't even make the playoffs. But that's when Alyssa Thomas stepped her game up, and she upped her scoring average by 4 points, her assists by three assists, and her rebounds by 4 assists up to that point. And she played well enough to put herself into the MVP conversation. And DeWanna Bonner, a consistent scorer throughout her career when she was in Phoenix as well when she's in Connecticut, has been steady and has shown her ability to stretch the floor as well. This is the most I've seen DeWanna Bonner put the ball on the floor throughout her career. Throughout her career, especially when she was in Phoenix. Obviously, she was known as primarily as a low post player that could stretch the floor, but you normally saw her score off the catch, or you saw her score quickly within 1 or 2 dribbles from the mid post to the low post. But this season, she's done a great job of playing almost a point forward in some instances, bringing the ball up the court and attacking off pick and rolls, attacking off 1-4 flats, attacking off the wing, dribbling, forcing defense to collapse, and kicking out, being a playmaker. And she's done a great job of expanding her game and showing that she can be multidimensional, especially this late in her career. You typically don't see that with players across any sports. So that was impressive to see. And we know that Connecticut's one of the best defensive teams in the league, with one of the highest efficiency ratings in the league. And they're going up against, a Minnesota Lynx team that, for all intents and purposes, were looking like they would be a lottery team at the beginning of the season, with Nafisa Collier not being there at the start of the season due to recovery from her pregnancy, and starting off 0-6. This is the first time that an 0-6 team, or a team that has started 0-6, ended up making the playoffs. But it speaks to the amount of talent that that this Minnesota Lynx team has. You know, Nafisa Collier did end up coming back, and her level of play has increased tremendously, and she's shown that she's a top 5 player in the league, no question about it. If not for A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, she'd be in the MVP candidate race as well. Followed by their 2 first-round picks from this past draft, with Diamond Miller and Dorka Juhas, who has shown the innate ability to adapt their game and to adjust to the play style and physicality of the WNBA. These are 2 players that were physically dominant in college, with Dorka Juhas playing the low post at UConn and Diamond Miller playing the point forward at Maryland. Both of those teams playing conferences that are known for the physicality and the defensive prowess, but both of those, the physicality is much different in college as opposed to WNBA, and both of those players have shown the ability to adjust, and not just adjust, but also show the ability to score in the same way as they score in college. We know that Diamond Miller did a great job of putting the ball on the floor and finishing off with 2 feet and absorbing a lot of contact when she attacked, and she's been able to do the same thing in the WNBA. And Dorka Juhas has showed she had great touch when she was in college, great touch around the rim, great ability to spread the floor from the elbow to about 18-19 feet, and she's been able to do the same thing in WNBA. And both of those players have shown the ability that they can score within the offense and score efficiently and maintain a high field goal percentage. But in terms of this matchup, it's going to come down to the offensive prowess of the Connecticut guards, that being Tisha Heidemann and Tiffany Hayes, and even the reserves for the reserves, Tasha Harris and Dewana and Carrington. Can they provide enough scoring power for Connecticut, and can they be able to shoot? Can they have the ability and show the ability to shoot off the catch when Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner are double teamed? And that's going to be the biggest factor for Connecticut. This is the Minnesota team that was about middle of the pack in defensive efficiency. This was a team that scored the ball with the best, though. Minnesota Lynx had one of the highest scoring averages in the WNBA. So this is a team that likes to get out and run, likes to push tempo, and likes to attack early, and likes to attack often. And this will be a tight-knit series. This will be a series that will, for all intents and purposes, go 3 games. It will go a full 3 games, and I think the first 2 games will be a split. However, I do believe that the Connecticut will take the first game in this series. I think they'll take the first game, but however, Minnesota is going to take the last 2, and I think that's because of the offensive prowess of their roster, of their core of Collier and Miller and Juhas. I think it's going to be a little too much for Connecticut, and I'm not sure if Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner are going to have enough support from Heidemann and their guards and Hayes, and their reserves coming off the bench to come along with them for the ride in terms of scoring. So I do have Minnesota winning this series 2-1, and this will be the most exciting series in the first round for the WNBA playoffs. And I'm looking forward to watching this series very much. Once again, we talk about the concept of contrasting play styles. This is a Connecticut team that does like to push tempo, but they're perfectly comfortable playing in the half court. But this is a Minnesota team that loves to get up and down every opportunity they get. even off misses, makes or misses, they're pushing, going to secondary break. So it's going to be exciting to watch this series for that reason. I do have Minnesota winning this series, though, 2-1. I have them winning the last 2 games of the series. I think Connecticut's experience is going to allow them to win game 1, and the fact that they have home court advantage in that first game. But I think that it's going to be a case of too much firepower for Minnesota, and that's going to overpower Connecticut over the course of the series. But speaking of firepower and speaking of high-octane offenses and excitement, we've got the same exact thing in the other series that we're going to talk about next between the Atlanta Dream and the Dallas Wings. So guys, stick around. We've got all that coverage for you coming up next. You are not going to miss it. So stay tuned. All right, everybody, welcome back. In case you missed our first 2 segments, we talked about what Breanna Stewart winning AP WNBA Player of the Year means for the WNBA and its marketability, and how the WNBA can capitalize off of that and use it to create, narratives and storylines to boost the entertainment value and boost the fan revenue and fan turnout. And we also covered the first round matchup between the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx, and how that's going to be the most exciting series of the first round for the WNBA playoffs, and how how the Minnesota Lynx will win that series in 3 games. In our last segment of the show today, we're going to talk about who was the better player between Juan Dixon and Jayson Williams. Great ACC matchup back from the early 2000s. 2 all-time great ACC point guards. I think it'd be nice to just see how close that those 2 players are. I think it's a lot closer than what people think. But with this segment, guys, I want to cover the other first-round matchup we have in the WNBA between the Dallas Wings and the Atlanta Dream. However, guys, before we get started, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well to stay up to date on all of our latest content. Hit that subscribe button as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to us on Patreon so you can stay up to date on all of our latest content and get access to exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. With that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, we've got our first round matchup between the Dallas Wing and the Atlanta Dream. So in the head-to-head over the course of the season, Dallas won this series 3-0 throughout the regular season. Dallas has home field advantage in this series. This is a Dallas team that was the 3rd in the league in scoring. It was led by Arike Ogunbowale, who averaged 21 points per game this year. And, she was followed and assisted by Satou Sabally, who, in my opinion, is the 4th best player in the WNBA. I wouldn't be surprised if by the start of next season that Sabally is in talks up there with A'ja Wilson and Breanna Stewart as some of the best players in the league. And actually, I go as far as to say that Satou Sabally is the 3rd best player in the WNBA. As of right now, I'd say it's A'ja Wilson at 1, Breanna Stewart at 2, Sabally at 3, and either Alyssa Thomas at 4 or Nafisa Collier at 4. But both of those players are your 4 and 5, and however you want to mix the last 2 between Collier and Thomas, I wouldn't hold you on that one. Just however you see fit. But definitely those first 3 of Wilson and Stewart and Sabally, those are 3 best players in the WNBA. This is Sabally, who is an Oregon native, as you guys know. On the season, she's averaging 18 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals. While shooting 43% from the field and 36% from the 3-point line. This Sabally has started to come into her own and gain that confidence, and she, like a lot of the other post players in WNBA, has shown the ability to put the ball on the floor. But because of Sabally's height, she's 6'5", almost 6'6", and because she has such a quick release, especially off the dribble, it is extremely hard for the opposing bigs to guard her. And when teams want to switch and put a smaller guard on, or a smaller player on her to match her quickness, she has amazing touch in the low post, especially in the mid post as well. And she has, she shows the ability to get that shot off quickly, or over the smaller defender. However, the only caveat I would say is that her release is a little short in terms of her release point. But because she's so tall compared to the other players in WNBA, she can get away with it, or at least tall in comparison to when she gets that switch. She can get away with it. But that being said, Dallas led by, like we said, Ogunbowale and Satou Sabally and Natasha Howard and Terry McCowan. That is a extremely talented front court, and which is why the Wings actually led the league in rebounding with 38.7, and as we said, Gumbawala is averaging 21 points per game. This is a very balanced Dallas team that has started to come on strong, especially towards the end of the season. This is a team that's starting to gain their chemistry and starting to play well together. But they're going up against a dream team that is led by Ryan Howard, who was WNBA Rookie of the Year last season. She's currently averaging 17.5 points per game, and Alicia Gray and Cheyenne Parker, who are averaging 17 and 15 points respectively. And this is another team that shoots the ball fairly well. But in the matchups, if the matchups from the regular season are any indicator, Dallas did a great job of holding Atlanta to under 38% from the field in all three of their matchups, which speaks testaments to the physicality that Dallas plays, not just in low post, but also on the perimeter as well. Dallas is a team that likes to fight through a lot of ball screens. They don't necessarily switch too often, depending on the team they're playing. So, like we talked about before in the FIBA World Cup, when you're playing against a team that doesn't switch and does a lot of hedging, recovering, and fights through those ball screens, that's more impact on your body as an offensive player, and that impact starts to wear down on you over the course of the game. And if you're not prepared for that, it will start to show in your decision making and your conditioning. So, Dallas has done a tremendous job of imposing their will and their physicality on teams, specifically Atlanta, over the course of the season. And as you know, Dallas is one of 4 teams in WNBA to finish with a record above 500. If Gumbawala can shoot the ball well, if she can shoot the ball above 55% during the series, it's going to put Dallas in a great position to win. But this is an Atlanta Dream team that's still fairly young. And this, just shows how much talent they have on this roster. And we haven't even talked about Haley Jones, who was the 2nd overall pick in the WNBA draft this past draft, and who I thought going into the draft you could argue was the best player in the WNBA draft. But because there's so much talent, especially at the guard position in Atlanta, it's hard for her to even see the floor. So imagine when she starts to develop and starts to get comfortable playing at this level and intensity in WNBA, having her out there running the point forward at 6'1". Man, you're talking about an Atlanta team that's going to be scary. This is going to be exciting to watch going into next season. But for right now, based on the way they're constructed and the amount of experience that they have, this will be an easy series for Dallas. I think Dallas is going to win this series. It's going to be a sweep. I have Dallas winning this series in 2 games. And like we just talked about, the physicality, but also the rebounding team. This is an Atlanta team that doesn't particularly rebound the ball too well, as opposed to Dallas, who, like we said, led the league in rebounding. But this is also an Atlanta team that has shown that they can go cold from the floor at times. They have shown that they can be sporadic with their shooting ability, and couple that with the Dallas team that's been more consistent with their shooting percentage and has more top-heavy talent in terms of having more players that can create their own shots for themselves with Sabali and Gumbawala. I just don't, because you're going to have to double Sabali in the low post, or you're going to have to double Gumbawala coming off those ball screens, and it's going to leave a lot of open shots for Natasha Howard and Tia McCowan and their other players and other guards. So, and I have Dallas win this series in a sweep, but it's going to be exciting to watch for sure. And Gumbawala is an exciting player who we haven't talked much about this WNBA season. And that's because there's so much talent in the WNBA now, but also because, like we talked about earlier, her teammate Sabali has taken a lot of the attention and a lot of the media notoriety because of how dominant she's playing. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off of Gumbawala to have to look to play make and score every possession. Now you have another player, especially a big, that can not only shoot and score, but also can create shots for other people as well. And as a guard, that takes a lot of pressure off of you. And it actually creates more balance within the floor. I mean, imagine running a two-man game, a high pick and roll with Sabali and Gumbawali, and you're going to have to double something. So, or you either have to double that ball screen, or you have to draw in more help. You have to put more help in the low post. Either whoever's guarding the weak side corner or the weak side wing. Well, essentially, both have to drop off because you don't want to let Sabali get that roll to the basket. And now you see the help is closing in more as a Gumbawali. Now you have more spacing to get that overhead pass, that wraparound pass to the weak side corner or the weak side wing, which now leaves more open shots for Dallas. And that has attributed to Dallas's success over the course of the season. And it's going to be a fun matchup. I think that Dallas can be a dark horse throughout these WNBA playoffs, and this matchup will show why Dallas is a dark horse with the way they perform. But guys, those are our previews for the WNBA playoffs, specifically the first round. Looking forward to it starting on Wednesday. I know you guys are too. With that being said, though, our last segment is coming up. Jason Williams versus Juan Dixon. Why is this matchup much closer than we think it is? Guys, we're going to cover all of that when we come back next. You're not going to miss it, so stick around. All right, welcome back. In case you missed our first 3 segments, we started off the show with covering the breaking news of Breonna Stewart winning AP WNBA Player of the Year, what that means for the WNBA, and how the WNBA can use that to increase their marketability and create more storylines and narratives that can be conducive for increasing revenue for the WNBA. And we also broke down the first round matchups of the WNBA playoffs between the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx, and why Minnesota Lynx will be able to pull off the upset, quote unquote, against Connecticut in 3 games. And we also broke down the matchup between the Atlanta Dream and the Dallas Wings, and why Satu Sabali is the 3rd best player in the WNBA, and the combination of her and Enrique Gumbawali are going to prove too much for Atlanta, and it's going to be a clean sweep for Dallas in that series. But I want to close out this show, guys, by talking about a very interesting matchup that isn't discussed too often in college basketball lore, and that's the matchup between Jayson Williams and Juan Dixon, 2 of the greatest ACC players of all time, and 2 players that had not only the ACC but college basketball on a stranglehold from 2000 to 2002. And I just want to break down why I think that comparison is a little closer than we think. But before we get started, guys, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of our latest content. Be sure to hit the like button as well. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to us on Patreon so you can get access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, be sure to follow the link in the ticker below. Listen, none of this is possible without you guys, and we're just so grateful for everything that you guys do, and to trust us with your sporting news and breakdown and analysis. I mean, it is such an honor. Thank you guys so much. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our other sports shows as well. Be sure to check out our baseball podcast, our college football podcast, fantasy football podcast, and our NFL podcast as well. All of our hosts provide great insight, and they are some of the best in the business. But with that being said, Jayson Williams versus Juan Dixon, 2 of the greatest guards in college basketball and ACC history. I mean, we're talking about some of the best of the best. We're talking about a Juan Dixon who is revered immensely in the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. As you guys know, he's a Baltimore native, went to high school in Towson, was the 17th overall pick in the 2002 draft by the Washington Wizards, and we have Jayson Williams, who was the 2nd overall pick in the 2002 NBA draft by the Chicago Bulls. And we know that Jayson Williams had his NBA career stunted because of a motorcycle accident that he was in, unfortunately. And we know that Juan Dixon had an extensive NBA career, but never he fulfilled his potential, but never quite reached that status of all-star level player. But both these players had immense success throughout their college career. I mean, Jayson Williams at the time was the most popular player in college basketball, and perhaps the most popular player in Duke's history. He was listed at 6'2", but watching him play, he was more like 6 foot, maybe 6'1" at best. Supreme explosiveness and athleticism, but also had a lot of body control. Did a great job of absorbing contact on most of his drives. Had excellent touch around the rim. Had an excellent mid-range game, especially off the dribble. Had an excellent floater. He was a solid defender as well. And we have Juan Dixon, who in his junior season actually led the ACC in steals per game, was an amazing shooter off the catch, did an amazing job playing off the ball alongside Steve Blake, who was the point guard at that time for Maryland. Juan Dixon was also an amazing rebounder for his size. Juan was a little taller than Jason Williams at 6'3", but once again, Juan was listed at 6'3", but he looked like he was more about 6'2", 6'1.5". Juan also had excellent touch around the rim. Juan had an amazing job of scoring in bunches. He was a very streaky scorer. And, most people know about Jason Williams, but very few people on a national scale talk about Juan Dixon. And, this Juan Dixon is a player throughout 141 games in college, averaged 16 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, shot 47% from the field, 40% from the three-point line, 85% from the free throw line, and had a win share of 20.6. And as you guys know, he won the NCAA championship with Maryland in 2002. Was an all-tournament player, 2-time all-regional player in the NCAA tournament. And in 2002, he was an NCAA tournament most outstanding player. He was a consensus All-American that season. He was a 2001-2002 ACC Player of the Year. He was a 3-time All-ACC player, 2-time All-ACC tournament player, and like I said, his amazing defensive prowess was a 3-time ACC All-Defensive Team player. So Juan Dixon has shown that he's a phenomenal player, especially on the defensive end. And when you talk about some of the best players in Maryland basketball history, you think of Len Bias, and you think of Juan Dixon and Steve Blake and Chris Wilcox and Grievous Vasquez and Melo Trimble. These are some of the best players in Maryland history. Lonnie Walker. And Juan Dixon is up there with some of the best players in to come out of University of Maryland. And then we know a lot of Jason Williams' pedigree. He was also an NCAA all-tournament player, NCAA all-regional player, 2001, 2002 AP Player of the Year. That same year, he won the Wooden Award. He won the Naismith Award, the Rupp Trophy, 3-time All-ACC player, 3-time All-ACC tournament player, ACC All-Freshman team, and the ACC tournament MVP. And he also won the NCAA championship in 2001, the year before Juan Dixon did. And for his career, in 108 games, he averaged 19.3 points, 3.7 rebounds, 6.0 assists, shot 45% from the field, 40% from the three-point line, 67% from the free throw line, and had a win share replacement of 17.6. So if we just go down and read the stats, this comparison between the two players is much closer than you would expect. And the reason I wanted to bring up this matchup was because I was watching the 2001 Final Four matchup between Duke and Maryland. And that's what made me realize that this combination, this matchup between Juan Dixon and Jason Williams is much closer than people talk about, quite frankly. If you had to ask me who was the better pure scorer, I would say Juan Dixon was the better scorer because of his ability to shoot the ball consistently from outside, but also, like we just read off, his free throw percentage played a factor in that, and his ability to score as well, and that factors in. But in terms of who was a better playmaker and who was a better point guard, quote unquote, Jason Williams was the better point guard. But also Juan Dixon did a great job of playing off the ball, which is something that Jason Williams could do, but he wasn't primarily known for. And Jason Williams got a lot of attention and a lot of notoriety because he had a very extensive and successful high school career. I mean, he was a high school parade All-American, 2-time consensus All-American. So he has had immense success, but we have to give Juan Dixon his credit as well for what he did at University of Maryland. And just watching the game, watching the play style, watching tempo and how they control the ball and how they run the floor and attack the defense, and their ability to attack and land on 2 feet with control and to play both sides of the ball defensively, coupling all of it in to the factor in decision-making process. If you ask me, I would have to say that Juan Dixon was the better player than Jayson Williams. Was a better player than Jayson Williams, at least collegiately. I just want you guys to go back and watch that game. Go back and watch that matchup between Duke and Maryland in that Final Four from 2001, and look at that game and tell me that you don't think Juan Dixon is a better player than Jayson Williams. And this is not to take any knocks away from Jayson Williams. Jayson Williams is an amazing, phenomenal player, one of the best players in Duke history. I think it just speaks credence to how good Juan Dixon was at the time, something that we don't necessarily talk about. Guys, that is all we have for our show today. We had a lot to talk about today, and thank you so much for sticking with us and tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well to stay up to date on all of our latest content. Be sure to subscribe to us on Patreon as well so you can get access to all of our exclusive content. And if you would like to donate to our network and our company, follow the link in the ticker below. None of this is possible without you guys. We're so grateful for all the support you guys show us, and we're just grateful to be able to provide you guys great content. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast, College Football Podcast, Fantasy Football Podcast, and NFL Podcast as well. Guys, we'll be back again same time tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions. Until next time, guys, peace.